It's 4 p.m. on the East Coast. Welcome to our America Decides election night coverage.
Folks, as you know, this has been an election year like no other, with a former president convicted of multiple felonies, facing even more indictments, and threatened by 2 assassination attempts.
And he's facing a historic vice presidential nominee who has only been at the top of her party's ticket for 107 days. Of course, after President Biden stepped aside from the race in July. And America faces what could be a long counting of votes in a country that is deeply divided and anxious about the outcome. Do any officials give you a day of when we might know?
That depends. It also depends on how close the race is, right, and when they might be able to call it, because now nobody, I should say, is willing to commit to a deadline for when they think it's going to happen. But we are hearing Wednesday evening, Thursday morning, and that is at least a day and a half earlier than 2020.
Other than that, she's been behind closed doors today, and we haven't been given any indication about when she might make an appearance here at her own watch party. I'm told it all depends on what the returns look like. They're also going to be watching to see what Donald Trump does. Does he come out and claim victory before there is a victory to be claimed by either side? And if he does, what does she do then? They say they've got plans for every eventuality, guys.
The Trump team is exuding confidence, saying that the fundamentals of this race, especially the issues of the economy and immigration, favor them. But he said that so far he believes that the election is fine, but he has also, almost in the same breath, raised doubts about the election process and cast unfounded doubts about election machines. But this has been a tumultuous race for the former president.
That some sources within the Trump campaign say he might potentially declare an early victory even before all the results are counted, before there's an official declaration. So,
I mean, candidates don't get to declare that they won. We saw in 2020 that Donald Trump claimed that he won, and he didn't win, and he's still claiming that he won in 2020. And that's, of course, a lie. And he used that lie to persuade people to march to the Capitol. And, of course, there was violence in his name, for which the leaders of his party blamed him for making a historic attempt to overthrow 81 million votes. So this looks very much like the same playbook. Now, that's just so far, this is just speculation about what the former president should do. So we should be careful to note that.
I mean, I'm a queer person in this country, and I'm very afraid of losing my rights. And fingers crossed that doesn't happen this week.
Is it still the economy? Do we see signs that something like abortion rights or the future of democracy also broke through? If it does, that's encouraging news for Democrats.
Yeah, it seems, though, as if that has been the theme throughout this campaign, right? Immigration, the economy, and gender rights. Those are the 3 issues that everybody's talking about.
Big
so we'll see if it bears out in exit polling. All right.
So, Matt, Trump's final message has bordered on dystopian. We heard from Drika Duncan in Michigan, who said that that's speaking to maybe some fear that voters have about where the country is headed.
That's because of those bomb threats, right, David?
Possibly the bomb threats.
Fulton County officials say they're investigating a number of bomb threats. What more do we know about those and the security concerns we've seen not only in Georgia but across the country today?
Yeah, Ed, officials in at least 2 states, Maine and Georgia, say police have responded to threats against schools and polling places today. None of them credible that it was from Russia. The FBI also putting out a statement indicating many of the threats appear to originate from Russian email domains. You know, law enforcement officials estimate about 30 bomb threat hoaxes have targeted election-related locations nationwide. There are about 17 fake bomb threats have targeted the state of Georgia alone.
He also raised some doubts about the integrity of the election, railing against voting machines, even though a majority of ballots are cast on paper ballots. Of course, those claims are unfounded there. But it is
there is a sense among the Trump campaign, among those at the highest level, that what happened in 2020 in their view, was unfair. Trump has continued to make false claims about the election being stolen. This has really been a 4-year project of grievance, unhappiness about 2020, and their skepticism toward the electoral system in this country continues tonight.
And the campaign is feeling optimistic, Vlad, and that's because they say they've left it all on the field. They've worked on this for months now, and in the past weekend alone across the state of Pennsylvania, volunteers knocked on 1.5 million doors. And so we have heard from them that their ground game is extremely robust, that they have been connecting with voters. And of course,
it's going to take 10 to 13 days, the state says, before Arizona's vote counts will be finalized. And that's normal because
this is really interesting. 35% of the people polled say the state of democracy is the most important issue. That's kind of surprising because I would have thought the economy would be number one, but the economy is followed there by a very close second. 31% say the economy. 14% say abortion is. 32% of voters say the condition of the economy is good. 67% say it is bad. If you are, so we're looking at those numbers, Ed. What's right?
These are the most preliminary bits of data we will get tonight. These will change. Nothing you see right now holds up even within an hour.
Throughout the course of the last 4 years, our ground game has been registering Republicans, and there are now 350,000 more Republicans in Pennsylvania than the last time that Donald Trump was on the ballot. So that's a ground game right there. And
Tim, in 2020, the former president declared victory prematurely. A lot of people across the country wondering what's the plan for tonight. Is he going to do it again tonight before all the states have been called?
Well, I think as we see the numbers coming in, and there are going to be a number of states that do report the numbers tonight, I think by the end of tonight we will have a pretty good idea who has won this election. Maybe a lot of those states might not be called, but I think that everyone who's watching it will know what direction it's headed. And I think that in a fair and free election, Donald Trump is going to win this thing, and he'll make that statement at the appropriate time.
And Tim, before we go, when you say fair and free election, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to the former president?
It means that all the laws are followed. That means...
know that the numbers can change, so we want to preface with that. But 46% of voters only have a favorable opinion of Harris, 42% of Trump.
Donald Trump should be winning this thing by 60 or 70% if 3/4 of America say the country's going in the wrong direction. And the only reason he's not, take it from a political pro, is because there's a portion of America who don't like that. They think he's mean. They don't like the way he acts. They don't think he's presidential. Some of them will still vote for him because they won't gas to be whatever it was back then. If he was more likable and could stay on message, this thing would have been over yesterday.
For months when you were asked about your age, you would respond with the words, watch me. Then
with the COVID, with dealing with everything we had to do with if we finally beat Medicare.
One of the questions is whether we're going to have a rerun here of 2020 where Donald Trump comes out after talking as though victory were going to be inevitable and then accusing the American public and the 10,000 jurisdictions that run elections of a giant fraud, claiming victory while votes were still being counted. If that were to happen, all bets are off. But like I said at the top, and as a supporter put it to me, the one thing that's certain is in this room tonight, there will be tears by the end of the evening.
The vice president has been enjoying dinner with extended family. She's also been doing some speech prep. And I'm told that the mood among top officials on the campaign at this hour is good. It's calm, even as the rest of the nation nervously awaits the results.
Voted for Kamala Harris. I think she's the right choice to continue our democracy.
She is more for the people.
I think the other guy's insane a little bit, and he makes me fearful.
I think she fits more what I'm looking for into a leader.
She would make history if she wins. This would make history for the world.
Harris herself hasn't talked much about the historic potential of her bid.
Honestly, I've just been so focused on the task in front of me.
But she did nod to it this morning in an interview with a black radio station in Atlanta.
To go back tonight to Howard University, my beloved alma mater, and be able to hopefully, recognize this day for what it is really, it's full circle for me.
She is waiting to see if she will be the one to crack that highest, hardest glass ceiling.
Trump, whose supporters stormed the Capitol after he lost the last election, said he was unconcerned about violence this time around. Supporters have witnessed a tumultuous Trump year, from a criminal trial to assassination attempts to a litany of false and sometimes offensive statements.
They're eating the dogs.
And crude insults of his opponents that rile up his base. That continued up to the very last rally last night, in this case against Nancy Pelosi.
She's an evil, sick, crazy bitch. Oh, no. It starts with a B, but I won't say it.
It was remarkable to see that rally, shouting the B word at his final political rally. Caitlin Huey-Burns. And the race for president has been incredibly close for weeks, and we may not know the winner tonight. And so we will say this a lot. Slow results do not mean that anything is wrong. Election officials want to get it right. So pack your patience. The night is young, but what a privilege it is to witness democracy in action.
How could there not be in this race full of surprises where you have two candidates who should not be here? Kamala Harris, the understudy who's now at center stage. Donald Trump was agreed by the leaders of both parties, including his own party, to have done something historically disqualifying, which is to try to overthrow the vote of the winner of the presidential election, yet they're both here.
January 6th.
January 6th. So here we have Kamala Harris's performance among black voters who are voting Democratic. You see she has 86%. Biden got 88%. The share right now, the picture in Georgia, Kamala Harris doing a little worse than her predecessor, Donald Trump doing a little bit better, but hardly by enough in either case to give us a final picture of what's happening in Georgia.
Do we know about...
The reason it's important, of course, is because women tend to vote for the Democrat, Republicans tend to vote for the Republican. Men tend to vote for the Republican.
Come on, try getting it out. Try getting it out.
I'll get it out.
I mean, I don't know if you're going to put this on television, but you don't even know what you're talking about. Try getting it out.
Within the past hour, it's evident that former President Trump is feeling pretty good so far about the turnout. I asked Trump, are you going to come out tonight and declare victory? He did not say he was going to do that. He said, we're going to watch the results at Mar-a-Lago. We'll see. He says it looks like we're winning everything so far. Republican turnout is amazing. He said at this point, his team is telling him the data looks good for Republicans, but he's hesitant to make any sort of conclusion.
We did see the Democrats voted in large numbers in the early vote that may have banked hundreds of thousands of early votes, which would be a good sign for Kamala Harris.
Norah, I've been talking to top campaign officials, and they all continue to say that they're feeling good right now. They keep pointing to early results from Indiana, because that's one of the first states to report, where they say in suburban areas, former President Trump is doing a lot worse than he did 4 years ago, and they are pointing to that as a sign of strength for the vice president. They say they're very pleased with the Puerto Rican turnout in Pennsylvania. When will she speak to the crowd that is starting to gather here? Nobody knows. It all depends on how the night unfolds and how quickly the results come in, and, of course, what Donald Trump does, which is always a wild card.
The only certainty at the end of tonight is tears. They're hoping it'll be tears of joy if Donald Trump can pull off what they see as the greatest political comeback in history. And Donald said he's feeling very confident, has a big lead. One of the worries, some reporting from our CBS colleagues, is that he may come out early, declare victory, do so before millions of votes are cast. And if that's the case, Norah, well, we're in a world reminiscent of 2020, and it'll be a long and chaotic night.
I have never heard his messaging as dark as it has been in recent weeks, where he falsely claimed yet again fraud in 2020. And he talked again with lies about criminal migrants, he said, pouring through our border. That is just factually untrue. But it's important that we talk about what he has done with race in this campaign since the very beginning, because it's really been unlike anything we have seen in modern political history. He has suggested that migrants have bad genes, that they're poisoning the blood of our country. What this is, because traditionally a closing argument in a campaign for a president has been hope and optimism. And that is what is thought to drive voters to the poll. And today from Donald Trump, what we heard there in Florida was that immigrants are, again, taking your jobs and ruining this country.
Well, the Harris campaign has said on the record that they believe those late deciders were breaking by double digits for them. Well, I was struck by even all the things that Donald Trump said, by having a crowd in Michigan shouting the B word to describe the highest ranking woman in American politics, Nancy Pelosi, when at the same time his own campaign acknowledges he needs women voters.
About Donald Trump sowing the seeds of, if he doesn't win, that it's rigged. We met very loud and proud Trump supporters who said unequivocally, if he doesn't win, we know this is rigged and that we will be out in the streets. And I met some people that said, I'm not going to make up my mind until I get into the booth today. And then the woman that really got to me was Peaches, who was a bartender, mid-40s, black woman, who said, I'm not voting for either one of them. They haven't deserved my vote. And I said, how can you feel this way, mid-40s, in this country? But she said, I want her to win. How can she win if you're not going to go and vote?
Yeah.
That kind of thing always throws me, Norah.
And that certainly exists. In Georgia, which closed half an hour ago, CBS also characterizes this race as a toss-up. There's just too many votes still not in yet. Let's take Ohio. CBS News characterizes Ohio as lean Republican. Remember, Ohio was once a battleground, but it has shifted right. Donald Trump currently has 23, and Kamala Harris has 3. As you can see, the night is young. Want to check in with Major.
I'm going to show you the 2020 presidential race in Georgia, but then I'm going to take you back to 8 p.m. on election night in 2020, and you see in North Carolina, where
we're saying the Harris campaign was saying they're seeing some late deciding voters participating. Well, that is happening in North Carolina. If we look at the exit polls from North Carolina and ask, when did you decide in the last week? Kamala Harris is leading over Donald Trump 58 to 37. So there's late breaking voters. It is happening in North Carolina, but caveat, only at 5% of the vote based on the exit polls. So it may not be a gargantuan group, but tight margins, that might be enough. I also just want to Kamala Harris is winning with women 55% to 43, Donald Trump 57 to 42. So that's the emerging gender picture inside North Carolina at the moment.
And that is a 27-point gender gap there, Costa, because we are getting word that Donald Trump is not done campaigning. In fact, he is calling into radio stations, trying to get people to stay in line. He called into WHT in Philadelphia, where he said, if we win Pennsylvania, we win the whole deal. Everyone has to stay in line. But do you think they would be doing that if they weren't worried? Does that show that they're worried?
Both campaigns are on edge. I wouldn't say anybody's feeling confident now because...
Wow, really interesting. Welcome back to CBS News coverage of Election Night 2024. Take a look at this live look at crowds gathering at what is Harris headquarters tonight, otherwise known as Howard University. Joining us now is Harris campaign co-chair Cedric Richmond. And Cedric, so good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. What's the inside scoop? What are you hearing inside the campaign?
Look, we have great enthusiasm. We're seeing it all over the country. That enthusiasm is real, and so we're excited about it. Well, I'll tell you, we have the better candidate. We have the better person. Vice President Harris has gone everywhere we win. I think people want to be optimistic. People want to be hopeful. People want to imagine that tomorrow is going to be better than yesterday. And that's what she talked to them about, and that she's going to ensure that tomorrow is better than yesterday.
He is with us from Trump headquarters in Florida. And Michael, good to see you. Thank you for joining us. What are your internal numbers showing?
We really like what we're seeing right now in places all across the South, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, North Carolina. Feeling very comfortable about what we're seeing there on the ground. The president is in a very good place based on what we saw with early voting, with absentee voting, for us to have a great day today.
In Florida, once an electoral battleground that has moved right in recent circles, CBS News projects Trump will win the Sunshine State. Major, what's happening in Georgia?
So you just mentioned, Norah, that Georgia we rate as a toss-up. We have about 33% of the vote in. You can see the distribution so far. So why do we do that? First thing I want to show you, what is our estimate? Our estimate is about 50-50 when all the vote comes in. I'm just going to run through. I'm not going to name the counties, but just watch the counties as I go through them and compare where Trump is now compared to where he was in 2020. You'll just see as I move through them, again, I'm not going to name them. The names aren't important, but you just see he's running slightly ahead of what he did in 2020. That was exactly the strategy the Trump campaign wanted to have. More turnout and higher vote totals all throughout rural parts of every battleground state. At least in Georgia, and I could go all over the map, the trend line is pretty consistent, Norah. He is doing that, even though
some of them, what the Harris campaign is seeing is real encouragement there, that in fact she's running ahead of President Biden in some of those ex-urban counties around Atlanta, higher totals than what the president got 4 years ago. That is how she wins a state like Georgia tonight. Can you run up the numbers in the suburbs? Can you get young college voters across the country to turn out? Can you lean on the black and Latino voters you need? In Georgia already, we're seeing good indications that the reason she's keeping it even is because Democratic advantages there around Atlanta, the biggest city in the South, may be improving.
We've been talking to election officials in key battleground states all across the country. The headlines: federal officials are investigating dozens of fake bomb threats at election-related sites all across the country, about 40 in Georgia alone. And federal officials tell us that these threats are picking up as this evening goes on. The federal officials have traced the threats back to an email or back to email accounts in Russia, though they're not yet sure that Russia is the actual source of these threats. But again, these threats have been deemed not to be credible. There's also what CISA, the country's top cybersecurity agency, calls a fire hose of disinformation coming from our foreign adversaries designed to sow doubt in our election system. Election officials across the country are taking an aggressive approach to these claims this year. They're finding the disinformation, they're exposing it, and they're debunking it as quickly as possible. All in all, they tell us they are tracking no national-level incidents that would have an impact on the security of our election infrastructure. And it's an infrastructure they repeatedly assure us has never been more secure.
Well, that is some good news tonight, right, Bill? Yeah, very good news.
Good news indeed.
Yeah, very good news. David, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we've heard all throughout the country, despite this flood of disinformation, despite these bomb threats and others, voting's gone relatively smoothly.
What is really different, Norah, is the way that they've gotten people to the polls. The Harris campaign ground game has been like a well-oiled machine, with 50 field offices spread across the state, with 110,000 volunteers since her launch, knocking on over 5 million doors. And this is something that they love talking about because they say they have a ground game that the Trump campaign doesn't even touch. But for the Trump team, they own that. And they say, yeah, we have about 24 field offices and we are reaching people, but they've really outsourced the door knocking and the...
And we're talking about something that I just received from a Harris Walsh campaign representative that said that they are focused on the ground game. They say close races come down to turnout and ground game. We have the ground game advantage, and so we will see there.
What about independents?
Well, the story about independents coming into this race was that Joe Biden won them in Georgia. The Democrats are not winning them. So Kamala Harris, Biden won them by 9 points. If we look now at what's on your screen, you see that Donald Trump has 54 and Harris has 43. So Donald Trump, according to the emerging picture from the exit polls, is up by 11 points in Georgia. In Pennsylvania, the independents represent 24% of the electorate so far. Trump is up 50 to 44. So that also is divergent from the picture that we saw in 2020 when Joe Biden won independents 52-44. So the overall net of all of this is that in Pennsylvania and Georgia, Trump is doing well with independents, whereas those voted for the Democrat the last time around.
Could that be decisive?
It could be decisive in a teeny tiny tight race. You want
and if she's underperforming in independence, that's a big story.
Exactly.
All right, we've got.
Look, Al Schmidt, the Secretary of State, told me we are probably not going to know the results from Pennsylvania tonight. Delay does not mean anything nefarious is happening. Pack your patience, you said at the top.
Thank you very much.
But tonight, in terms of talking to Republican officials, they are feeling very good about how things are looking.
Campaign headquarters. It's 8:30 p.m. in the East, 5:30 p.m. in the West. Let's check in with the three battleground states where the polls are closed. In Georgia, CBS News characterizes this race as a toss-up. Look at this. Only 53% of the vote in, even though it's 8:30. You know, the Secretary of State had told us we were going to have more votes in. I'm going to check in with David Becker on that, what's happening. And we'll check in at the Magic Wall. Let's take a look at North Carolina, another important battleground state tonight. Again, it is early in the night, but look at this. It is a toss-up at this hour. New reporting coming in from North Carolina we want to share with you shortly. And then Pennsylvania, the electoral prize of the night. And remember, Pennsylvania takes a little longer to count, but these are the early numbers that are coming in, and CBS News rates this as a toss-up.
Look at the transformation of this once solidly Democratic county, a place of highly concentrated Democratic support. One of the anchors to Democrats in Florida when it was a competitive state. The fact that it is competitive no longer flows through Miami-Dade. There's one.
Gentlemen, this is excellent information. Can we go back to Georgia and just see? I want to see where the outstanding vote is there. Of course, we have heard there's record voting. We knew in the early vote, but also today. So just.
And so far, we are at lean no, because they have not reached that supermajority. Now, Norah, this is so interesting, not just on the very practical, real-world implications of this for the women of the state.
Kamala Harris has 55% of women to Donald Trump's 43% of women. So she's ahead by 12 points. But just for historical reference, in 2020, when the share was a little bit lower, 52% of the electorate, Joe Biden had a 15-point lead among women. So Joe Biden, according to the exit polls at this moment, as we've been talking about, they're tentative, had a better lead with women than Kamala Harris has at the moment. Let's just talk about men briefly, if we must. Donald Trump is up 53-44. So he's up by 9 points. In 2020, Donald Trump won men with 8 points. So Donald Trump, now, 8 and 9 is relatively basically even in terms of the exit polls, so you don't want to go too far on a single point gap. But essentially, Kamala Harris, based on these figures, is not doing as well as she needs to do to turn out the women's vote.
So is this the so-called bro vote?
The bro,
the men under 30?
The bro vote is basically even, which is not great for Kamala Harris based on the traditional patterns of voting.
So I wonder, let's just take stock of where we are, because you have said that he's doing better among young men. He's the bro vote. She's underperforming with women, if these exit polls are correct. And in Georgia and North Carolina, she's also underperforming Joe Biden among independents.
That's right. And if you want to just look at women under 30, Harris, it's 63-35. So she's doing very well. Of course, Biden was 67-32. So his margin was bigger with women under 30 than hers was as well.
And you know what has been so fascinating to watch in this campaign is how Kamala Harris herself has avoided using gender as something to campaign on. And I can't help but think about the difference between this campaign and Hillary Clinton's campaign. I had that symbolic glass ceiling that she clearly did not crack at that time. And here we are with Kamala Harris intentionally almost avoiding questions about and having to answer questions about her gender, that she has not asked voters to see her gender or her race or her ethnicity, for that matter, as a reason that she should get this job. It has been a very clear strategy for her to not campaign on gender.
And Norah,
there were cracks in the glass ceiling, just didn't get shattered.
Some cracks, exactly.
I remember that speech. Yes. You were there, yes.
It came late, exactly.
If you dive deeper into these gender numbers, there's some real concern for Democrats. Let's start with Latino men, for example. Trump is winning them 54-45 right now. And she's only winning 61% of Latinas. Those are low numbers. Those are not comfortable numbers. The other one, if you look at white women, the hope was that she could win them nationally, given the abortion issue, given the fact that she would make history. Trump is winning what traditionally happens, 52% of them, based on this exit poll. So no measurable difference there either among women. Both of those would be real warning signs for the Harris team.
There was a belief that women, Republican women in particular, would go into the booth and vote their values, vote their conscience.
And they may still.
And they kept saying, you don't have to tell anybody, it's your own private vote. And what we're seeing early on, that does not appear to be the case.
This is national. So we'll see whether in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, these numbers are more specific and different. But nationally, at least, it doesn't look like there's been much movement and losses with Latinos.
Data. Though I've been talking to my sources in Georgia via text message in recent minutes, and they say they feel really good about turnout because the Republican Party this time around is unified, unlike it was in early 2021. Meanwhile, in Philadelphia, Representative Brendan Boyle, a key Democrat in Philadelphia, says Democrats have to feel good. He's seen on the ground very strong turnout among Puerto Ricans in the North Philadelphia precincts. Historically low turnout in those precincts. That congressman, who's one of the main organizers for the Harris campaign on the ground, says very high turnout. But all of this is coming as the Trump campaign is preparing to potentially contest this election. We are preparing a legal and political effort to help Trump fight this in Congress, should he appear to be defeated. But right now, a lot of optimism in the Trump campaign, but it is very early.
It is very early. We're also, Nancy, I know you've been talking to your sources inside the campaign. First, are they nervous?
Norah, the campaign officials I've been speaking to sound fine. They don't sound incredibly ecstatic. They don't sound full of despair. And I think that that's a result of a couple of things. First of all, it's still early in the night. Lots of results still to come in. Second of all, this is, as expected, a very tight race. The Harris campaign itself was insisting for weeks that this was a margin of error race in all the battleground states, and it turns out they may be right. So it is a nail-biter. As one White House official put it to me a short time ago, nauseously optimistic is the phrase of the day. You've talked a lot about those long lines on college campuses. Well, the campaign was prepared for that, and so today they dispatched Paul Rudd and other top entertainers to entertain those students in line, make sure they stayed in line.
And it's not only the Democrats that are encouraging people to stay in line. Donald Trump just a short time ago also tweeting about the counties in Pennsylvania where...
And the Trump campaign is blowing up everyone's phone up here on the press riser with what they see as optimistic numbers with independents, with Latinos, and with black voters. And all of that adds up to the first bubbles of a certain champagne mood in the room here in West Palm Beach. It is still early. They are still prepared for anything, but they're definitely starting to smile, definitely starting to sway. They're feeling good here at Trump headquarters.
All eyes are on the 7 battleground states. You can see them here in purple. In Michigan, CBS News rates this as a toss-up. In Wisconsin, CBS News rates the presidential race there as a toss-up. And the same can be said in Arizona. CBS News rates this as a toss-up as well. In Pennsylvania, polls have been closed for an hour in the Keystone State. And you guessed it, CBS News rates this as a, everyone say it, toss-up. And in Georgia, the Peach State, CBS News rates the presidential race as, say it together, toss-up. Yes. And in North Carolina, CBS News rates this as a toss-up as well. So at this hour, the battleground states are all toss-ups. That means the vote is still coming in. It's just too close for us to be able to say what's happening in those states. But we've got lots of data to share with you from the exit polls. Let's take a look at the great state of Texas. CBS News projects Donald Trump will win in Texas. We'll have those big numbers from Donald Trump in part because of the calling of Florida and Texas. Of course, when states like New York or California or other big electoral prizes come through, if they go for Kamala Harris, that will add to her vote tally as well. Gentlemen, we are dying to know what's happening in these states.
Norah, Anthony is still working at the data desk making calls. I'm going to take this one by myself. Let's talk about Georgia. Where is the outstanding vote still to come in? Geographically, I'm going to show it to you right here. Highly concentrated around urban Atlanta. That's I don't need to say urban in Atlanta. Obviously, it's a big city. So let's go to what Kamala Harris needs, according to our understanding of the outstanding vote, and what is our CBS News estimate. So you can see very, very close. That means of that outstanding vote, this is how much Vice President Harris would need to make Georgia super competitive, and we are estimating she's going to hit that mark. So what I'm telling you is, based on our data, based on our estimates of that data, matching over with the exit polls, very long night in Georgia, could go down to the wire.
Well, let's take a look, too, at North Carolina,
Sure.
because that's that other battleground that's been closed for a while.
Yes, we have a needs estimate for Kamala Harris and a CBS News estimate right at that margin of 53 to 52. So, again, that's what's outstanding vote she would need. That's our estimate of what she's able to get based on what is out there and our estimates of the vote and the exit polls. So, again, very close. That's why both North Carolina and Georgia moving toward photo finish for both.
A little bit of a quicker turn in counting in Pennsylvania because of how some things have changed there. We expect to see fewer mail-in ballots than we did in 2020, of course, because that was the height of COVID, and that's how people were voting. We've also seen some technology advancements in the state where machines are faster and they're opening up these envelopes there. But counting in Pennsylvania is complicated. They did not, by law, start counting ballots until 7 a.m. today. They're one of the few swing states, battleground states, where they have this no pre-canvassing law in place. So we always have a delay in Pennsylvania. In fact, Al Schmidt even told me he hates the word delay because it's not actually just a delay. It's just how they count Pennsylvania. Buckle up, it takes time. So he's saying that doesn't mean anything is wrong.
That's what's happening in Pennsylvania as well.
The Harris campaign remains incredibly confident, in part because what transpired just up the street a few days ago seems to be paying off for the Harris campaign, not the Trump campaign. The Madison Square Garden event, where that comedian said all those nasty things about Puerto Rican people and others across the country, it is registered. They noticed this morning that turnout in the 3 most Puerto Rican-dominant wards around Philadelphia had exceeded the 2020 numbers already, or 79% of the total had already shown up by lunchtime today. That's a good sign. They're in front of a black audience. She went to a deli. She went to a Puerto Rican restaurant. All of it designed to drag people out of their homes and vote. This is why tonight Democrats are feeling, as Nancy said a while ago, fine, because ultimately they believe this is what's going to get them the votes they need.
We saw some of the Puerto Rican voters who, one woman was on the fence, but after that comment from the comedian, she said, nope, I'm now leaving Trump. But I said, but Trump wasn't the one who said it. They said it didn't matter. He didn't stop it. He didn't stop it. And they took great offense at that. And they think he took too long to even apologize for it and even own up to it.
It's not always clear, though, if these ethnic groups vote in a monolithic way at all. I have to tell you that.
As you know,
Norah, the FBI is reporting tonight that videos have surfaced online impersonating the FBI insignia to promote fake narratives, including complaints about malfunctioning voting machines. Now, our similar videos out this weekend were attributed to Russian bad actors. Now, our elections are typically a showcase for our democracy, but our adversaries also see them as an opportunity to sow chaos and discontent. The U.S. intelligence community, the FBI, and CISA all say that Russia is the most active threat. And the Department of Justice says that Russia is getting involved in our elections to bolster Donald Trump. They're pumping out fake videos, fake articles, fake social media posts, all of this to spread disinformation so that we will lose belief in our own election system and to stoke divisions among us.
Why does Russia want Donald Trump to win?
Well, Russian intelligence tried to hire Americans to carry out violence in the United States of America. So it is making us doubt ourselves, our systems, each other, and possibly stoke violence.
And take a look at how voters who are older than age 65 are voting. There you see Harris has 55% of the vote and Trump has 43. Then Joe Biden only won that group of seniors by 2 points.
Oh.
So Kamala Harris is up by 12 among seniors in Michigan. Joe Biden was only up by 2. So Harris is at 16. Biden was at 6. So remember, there was that late-breaking poll
in Iowa.
Ann Seltzer in Iowa, which included in it that Kamala Harris was ahead in Iowa, which is a red state that Donald Trump should be ahead in, and she said a large portion of that was older voters. Are those older voters disappointed with the way Donald Trump has behaved? That's a question yet to be answered.
Ed,
that is part of it. Yeah. And this, again, is why they've been so confident that ultimately they'd prevail in those big 3 states in the Midwest, is they knew, with elderly voters especially, they were going to do all right.
All right. And in the race to 270, Donald Trump has 162. Kamala Harris, 62. We're going to check in with the battleground states. Here's a look at the blue wall states. CBS News projects them all as toss-ups at this hour, because something interesting is happening there.
Something interesting is happening in Virginia. We rate it currently as lean Harris. You can see 59% of the vote in. But what is interesting and cannot be described in any way, shape, or form as encouraging to the Harris campaign is how much farther behind she is running than, let me show you right now, Joe Biden did in Virginia in 2020. You see that. 54%. She's at 48.5%. I'll show you what she needs and what we project. A narrow victory in Virginia, not nearly as large as Joe Biden achieved in 2020. That's a story of itself.
And I am hearing from one source close to the Trump campaign that Trump is actually performing better, 2 to 4 points in these rural counties in Virginia and North Carolina.
So they're feeling good about Virginia. Down in Mar-a-Lago right now, my top sources say they're feeling very good about North Carolina and Georgia. That makes the emphasis on Pennsylvania so much more key for Democrats.
Now, in terms of talking to those with the Harris campaign and Democrats here in this state, they are continuing to keep their fingers crossed because they acknowledge and note that there are still a lot of outstanding votes out there, particularly in Democratic strongholds right here around Metro Atlanta. Places like Fulton, DeKalb, and others where they feel they will pick up some more numbers and pick up some more steam. So they are continuing to watch and wait these returns as they come in.
DC and Ed, I know it's still loud there as many people are celebrating and waiting to potentially hear from the vice president. But what are you hearing?
Hi, Norah. It is a celebratory mood here in Washington, D.C. on Howard's campus. Every time the announcement comes of a state won by Kamala Harris, there are huge uproars and applause. And, of course, when Donald Trump, in fact, wins a state or projected to win a state, there are boos. But we should note what we've been hearing throughout, and as we've been saying all along, it is really down to those crucial states. At the early part of the evening, it seemed, and I talked to the National Urban League, the National Action Network, and the NAACP. They were all excited about the turnout as we've gotten deeper into the night. Some of those states didn't hit the projections they wanted to see, only by a couple of percentage points. And so the black vote, while it turned out, particularly in Detroit, in Atlanta, and in Philadelphia, there is still concern that it may have been a little softer than they wanted to see, but it is, as you all have been saying all evening long, still very early, and we'll have to see some of we will just have to wait and see how the black vote starts to roll itself out and the impact it will have.
Well, let's start first with the blue wall, if you will, there. These are the states that the Democratic Party believes if they win all three of them, and the numbers show Kamala Harris would become the next president of the United States. At this hour, CBS News rates all three of those as toss-up. So that's where that stands at this hour, as that they were saying it would be quicker this year, but we don't know yet because we know that polls are still open in Pennsylvania because there were long lines today.
They're telling students to stay in line. Long lines at the University of Michigan, so around Ann Arbor tonight. Part of why they think they're doing okay. They report that they see that they're expected to do slightly better than expected with suburban early voters in Georgia. All of those reasons why, to Democrats, it's still a very early night despite those numbers.
All right.
So we're in good shape. I think what we've seen today with this huge turnout is that voters trust the process here in Georgia. I'm the first Secretary of State to ever do an audit of the voter rolls to make sure only American citizens are voting in our elections. I've done two. First one 24 months ago and just finished up in July. People trust the results. No matter how you vote in Georgia, we have photo ID. That also shored up voters' concern about the absentee ballot process.
On it, Bill Whitaker, he's part of our Democracy Watch team tonight. And Bill, I know you have some new reporting about what's happening in Philadelphia.
Oh, we've got reporting that former President Donald Trump is claiming that there is massive cheating happening in Philadelphia. There's absolutely no truth to this allegation. The Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner chimed in, also saying there is no factual basis for any of these claims. And if you will remember, Donald Trump made similar claims about Philadelphia in 2020.
Bill Whitaker, thank you. Learned tonight.
Well, this isn't, Norah, thank you. This isn't a mistake. This is a strategy from the former president. He is laying the groundwork to challenge the results, and he did. This is all a strategy to sow doubt. And the folks in Pennsylvania, the governor there said they are very legitimately worried about the damage that this could do, the potential for violence in the streets that we could see as a result of this, because people get whipped into a frenzy, because the former president has told them their vote has not been taken seriously. There are real consequences to lies like this when they're spread.
And his words have power, and they believe them. Believe him. We saw that when we were there.
Exactly.
And we see in the exit polls, too, that people are concerned about violence in the days ahead. We have much more.
But on almost every single one of those, Harris is running slightly behind Joe Biden. This is an accumulating problem for the Harris campaign outside of Raleigh and Charlotte. These other areas, historically strong for Democrats, stronger for Biden than they have been so far tonight for Harris.
Right. And Biden lost North Carolina.
Correct, by 74,000 votes, yes.
Underperforming.
But it's essentially the same story that Major and Anthony were telling, which is when we look at this election, the Democrats have to turn out their voters, and Donald Trump has to turn out his voters. Well, Latinos are key to the Democratic coalition. Let's look first in Arizona, how Kamala Harris is doing with Latino voters. Well, she's up by 14 points, so you might think, well, she's doing pretty well. But if you compare that to what Joe Biden did in 2020 in the state of Arizona, he won them by 24 points. Yeah. So Kamala Harris is underperforming what Biden did in 2020. Also, Kamala Harris has a 50 to 45 point lead. That's in Nevada, where the polls just closed. That's 5 points. Biden was up by 26 in Nevada.
Remember, we're seeing in the national numbers that Trump is winning Latino men. That's part of what's changing this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, and not doing as well, and she's not doing as well with Latinas.
And I had spoken to one Democratic pollster before this evening, and he said very clearly, if Trump on the national numbers gets 40% of the Latino vote, Harris is screwed.
Yeah.
That is a very concerning number for them. And
just to give you the national Latino vote, Harris is up by 5 points. Biden won it by 21 points. That's the national number.
So concerning to the Harris campaign.
The point that you hear from...
He said Trump is now on track based on all of the returns he has seen to do better than expected in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I just
heard from a top Democratic operative who says he's worried about Wisconsin, too. And so I think the bottom line is that everyone is pretty nervous right about now. They're certainly nervous in this crowd here at Howard University. Unlike all the Kamala Harris rallies we've been to in the past few weeks, it's totally silent here. People are watching the screens, they're checking their phones, they're having hushed conversations. They're waiting for some good news, and they haven't seen any in a while. And the Harris campaign knows that. It knows that Democratic supporters across the country are getting worried. And so they are trying to reassure them that they are seeing some bright spots. And I'll just, they are not expressing optimism that they are going to win any one of these particular states, but they haven't given up either, and they continue to insist that they are still in the fight in North Carolina and Georgia.
But what you end up happening is a population of people are in this room and in many rooms like them all over the country who think they won in 2020, think they're winning again here in 2024, and think the only way they can lose is if there is cheating. And so, but when you talk to people here, they say, yeah, we are also concerned about violence by Democrats. And their imagination, what's going to happen tonight and in the days ahead, is potentially riots in blue cities. Norah.
And all you have to do is look at our nation's capital, which is boarded up and fenced up in anticipation of some of the concern about what is ahead. Tony Dickerson just in from the CBS News data desk. CBS News projects Donald Trump will win the state of Ohio, the home of his running mate, Senator J.D. Vance.
But still, a lot of votes have not been tabulated just yet. The UAW president took the stage not too long ago, encouraging people, trying to create that celebratory mood, telling me earlier today that they feel confident in the strides that they've made, knocking on over 300,000 doors in the last couple of weeks of this campaign.
7 states, they are all toss-ups at this hour. Let's take a look at the peach state of Georgia. At this hour, you can see 86% of the vote in, but we're going to at North Carolina. As you can see, about 80% of the vote in the Tar Heel state. Donald Trump currently with a lead, but we still rate this as a toss-up. And then take a look at Pennsylvania. This is the big electoral prize of the night, with its 19 electoral votes. And Republican sources I'm talking with there say that Donald Trump has performed well in the rural counties, but just 57% of the vote in. And if you were with us 4 years ago on this journey, you'll remember that it took a few days to get the full count in from Pennsylvania. They do not pre-process their ballots like most other states do. So it takes them a little bit longer. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It just, you got to pack your patience.
So how do we look at Pennsylvania writ large right now? We look at it this way. To prevail in Pennsylvania, claim those vital 19 electoral votes, Kamala Harris, the vice president, needs 52% of the outstanding vote. What is our current estimate based on the data? 54%. So she is in position currently to achieve victory in Pennsylvania based on the data set as we know it and as it overlays exit poll data and historical trends. That's where we are in Pennsylvania right now. And in Luzerne County, running slightly ahead of Joe Biden. Those are somewhat soft, encouraging signs for the vice president, at least in Pennsylvania. Again, 32% of the vote in. Kamala Harris doing slightly better than considerably better than Joe Biden did, at least at this stage of the evening in Pennsylvania.
We have but first, CBS News projects that Iowa is for Trump, that the former president has won the state of Iowa. You see just a little bit more than half the vote in there. There had been that poll by the Des Moines Register suggesting that she was doing much better than expected. But Iowa, a reliably Republican state there, and those 6 electoral votes now in the Republican column.
What is the overall needs for President Trump to prevail in Michigan? What is our current projection? 46%. Again, these are projections based on the vote that's come in so far, our estimation of what the overall turnout will be, and overlaying that with exit poll data. So that's what we can basically say about Michigan at this hour. What is the general orientation? Vice President Harris, according to our estimates, needs 50% of the outstanding vote. We saw just a moment ago where it's concentrated, Madison and Milwaukee and the surrounding suburbs. According to our estimates, she's going to get 43% of that outstanding vote. That could be problematic in Wisconsin for some of the reasons that John mentioned on some of the exit poll data in that state, showing a difference of the coalitions and the assemblage therein.
So she may be in trouble in Wisconsin.
She may be in trouble in Wisconsin, exactly, based on our current estimates, yes.
Really interesting. All right. Thank you, Major, for indulging me. Now,
there were a number of incidents today with bomb threats in your state. What can you tell us about what the impact was, practically speaking, on just administering this election?
There were 4 bomb threats made to precincts and 1 to an office building, our office building in Lansing. All of those were investigated and debunked and essentially treated like swatting attempts. No one was really significantly disrupted. No voter was stopped from voting, and things continued apace and continued smoothly. A quick investigation, a quick response, and we quickly were able to source it to Russian interference.
And I can tell you that we're seeing a vote shift at about -2 overall from Democrats 2020 to now. And you're seeing perhaps a 6 to 8 point swing from 2020 away from the Democrats. I know the other thing that's really important here is it looks like turnout is also tracking to be a little lower. None of that bodes well for Kamala Harris, and that's your local level dive into Philadelphia.
Broadly speaking, Latinos are still overwhelmingly Democrat, but Donald Trump has very successfully started to get into this population. Many Latinos seem to be finding a sense of belonging in Trump's otherism because he is talking to them the same way he talks to white voters. They hear him on the economy. That's their message from him.
Coming on the air with some breaking news in Georgia. CBS News now rates the presidential race there as lean Trump. This is the first of the 7 battleground states that we are rating as lean one way or the other. And in California, Vice President Harris's home state, CBS News projects that she will win there. And here is where we stand right now in the race to 270, shows Donald Trump with 211 electoral votes and Kamala Harris with 145, a number. And so why is Georgia now lean Republican?
We will explain that to Norah and the team here in a moment. Anthony, show the needs and our projection on where the vice president is in terms of the need.
She needs 62%, we believe, right? And right now, she's on track to get 58%. Now, there's some estimate, or there's a range around these estimates, right? So you say, well, that is trailing what she needs, hence the lean, but it's not trailing by so much that we can project the race just yet. But we do want to give you, like I said, the whole sense of the race, and that is lean Trump, Norah. So far, Harris is trailing Joe Biden's numbers there in Milwaukee, and that doesn't necessarily tell a strong story for her. Okay, so there's your needs, right? Needs 51% of the estimate. That's not that hard to do, okay? So the trouble is, given what I just showed you in those key Democratic counties, right now she's tracking it getting 44% of the outstanding vote. So, again, still a lot of vote to come, still some uncertainty here, but right now not immediately on track.
And because we only have 61% of the vote in statewide, that's why we have not made a designation in this race. It is still a toss-up based on our estimates, but these are the trend lines at this hour.
So it's even, flat among union households in Wisconsin. Biden won that group by 19 in 2020. So
this is the working class vote.
This is the working class vote. This is the connections longstanding to Joe Biden's advocacy for the unions that helped him in 2020. But here in Wisconsin, if Wisconsin is not going well for the vice president, that could be one reason why.
So let's play that scenario out, because if Georgia goes red and Wisconsin goes red, does Kamala Harris have a path to victory, and what does it include?
So, it does, and it narrows.
Yeah, so Norah, I want to show you something. This is the briefing book that we all got, right? And right in the beginning of it, there are 21 different ways that Democrats can get to 270 plus, okay? 21 different options for our political unit. If you go through now and cross out all the Georgia and Wisconsin options, she's down to very few. So this is make Wisconsin red.
Wisconsin goes red as well.
So now here's how she could get to 270. She would get Pennsylvania.
Got to hold on to Pennsylvania.
She'd have to get North Carolina.
Got to flip that.
And give her Arizona.
Got to take Arizona as well.
That's one way she can do it.
And
Arizona and Nevada.
Right.
There aren't many options at this point.
Right.
Okay.
But I've been talking with my top Democratic sources close to the Harris campaign. They say Jen O'Malley Dillon, who's running the Harris campaign, now believes the blue wall is the path to victory. She sent out a memo stating that. And Speaker Pelosi, the former speaker, for nudging him out of the race. A source close to her says she's watching everything. She's, quote, still optimistic. Still optimistic. Perhaps one of the most powerful Democrats. That's her phrase, based on a source close to her watching the returns.
Bob, it's interesting. They say she must win, but do they think she can win? There's such a big difference there. You expect people to be optimistic at this point, but it's
come down to the turnout, Gail. They're still optimistic, from Pelosi to others, that she can do it, but they see a narrowing path, but a still viable path. But there's a lot of Democrats, to be clear, on edge right now.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that we can see with the data and our reporting, but it's
I'm hearing similar to the reporting that was just shared. Look, that path to 270 is narrow. I thought it was narrow coming in to the evening. I think Jen O'Malley Dillon's memo is correct, that it seems like the blue wall is the path. And I will say this. I think Democrats are kind of coming to grips with a stubborn reality that some of the bets that were made in this cycle may just not pay off. That doesn't mean Kamala Harris will lose. But it does mean that some of the bets maybe around abortion and some of the bets around Donald Trump maybe receding in public regard just did not come to fruition. There is still a path despite all that. And I remember in 2020, many Democrats around this time of night felt maybe similar to looking at the map right now, the same way that they felt 4 years ago, the same way they feel now.
Yeah, I mean, as I look at the map and the path to victory, if she cannot win Wisconsin, in other words, if there's a piercing of that blue wall, she would have to win Arizona.
Right.
And so that's really what it would come down to at this point. Nevada's still too small at 6 EVs. She'd need Arizona, and I have to go back to the magic wall or the data desk and figure out what's happening in Arizona, because I don't have a good sense yet about what's happening in Arizona.
I'm hearing that the Democrats are cratering their support among Latino voters, and it's across the board.
Leslie Sanchez, thank you. And we have a race alert at this hour. CBS News rates North Carolina as lean Republican. And so while the vote count is still coming in, our CBS News models indicate this race leans Republican for Donald Trump. Remember,
in the way that the vice president needs if she's going to prevail in North Carolina. Our estimates suggest she needs 59% of that outstanding vote. And we project, when it's all said and done, and Norah, you join me over here. Great to have you back at the wall. 48%. So that's a big gap. 59% she needs. 48% is our current estimate based on outstanding vote, historical patterns, and exit poll data.
Says they still believe that the blue wall is the ultimate way to win. It's close in Pennsylvania. It may take a couple days to get the vote there. Michigan It looked fairly good last time we looked. Wisconsin did not look that great.
Did not look good, no. But so let's go to Arizona.
Because this was my thing. Because Wisconsin is 11 electoral votes. If she loses that, she has to win Arizona. So what is happening in Arizona? What is happening in Arizona?
So here we have 51. That's overperformance of Joe Biden. Things presently look good in Arizona. And
for the Democrats.
For Kamala Harris. Here's where what does Kamala Harris need in Arizona to prevail? 50%. What do we have a current estimate of her projected ability to retain or achieve from the outstanding vote? 51%, on the razor's edge.
So then for Kamala Harris, what does that look like?
Okay, so she's at 226.
Got to take Pennsylvania.
Let's say she squeaks by there. Let's say she squeaks by in Michigan. Now she needs 10 more.
Arizona.
Let's make that red right now. See? Okay, this is the problem for her.
This is a major. All right.
Okay.
Nevada?
Turn it blue.
Turn it blue. Okay. She holds Nevada from last time.
But he wins.
He does win.
Okay.
Arizona.
Give her that one. She wins.
That shows you exactly.
This is why
Arizona.
we're going to be here a few days potentially, because if we're going to get in all these tight margins, we're going to have to be waiting for every single last vote. That's the way it could conceivably happen.
If you haven't bitten your nails yet,
start biting.
They're going to be bitten. All right. That's where we stand. Those are the past, Norah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm just walking back over.
Yeah.
I think I know, Margaret, you heard me. I had a question for you about the abortion initiative. Yeah.
I did. I think that's so fascinating to see. Perhaps it's that split ticket, or as you said, it just didn't boost the vice president. I was just looking at my path to victory. There's some other very narrow ones, some pretty obscure options here, but we are left with a total of 5 paths for her at this point.
If the vice president were to lose Wisconsin and that blue wall was pierced, which was going to be her easiest way to victory.
10:53, time of dancing has begun here at Trump headquarters. YMCA came over the loudspeaker, and Trump seemed to be pulling ahead in Pennsylvania. Loud cheers in the room. They're now looking at the exit polls in Trump world, quote, gleefully. That's the word from Trump world. And the young staffers, junior staffers, according to Jake Rosen, another one of our colleagues, they are now looking for apartments in Washington, D.C. and talking openly about what jobs they want in the new administration. So how are you feeling in one word? I heard fantastic, I heard relieved, and I heard vindicated, Norah.
And Nancy, we knew this would not be an early night, given how close the polls have been, and it looks like it is going to be a very late night, or may stretch for several days to get in that Pennsylvania vote and more. What are you hearing? I know that the Harris campaign manager just put out a new memo.
Right. She did put out a memo saying that she feels good about what she is seeing in the blue wall. But I can tell you that Democrats outside the campaign don't feel particularly good about what they're seeing in Wisconsin in particular. And they're surprised to be worrying this much about Wisconsin. This is not the state of the 3 in the blue wall that they were most concerned about going into the night. Partly they thought they'd see a repeat this time around. Instead, it's this nail biter. And Jen O'Malley Dillon sending out this memo, basically telling the entire Democratic stratosphere that there's a lot of vote outstanding in Milwaukee, that it may not come in until 3 to 5 in the morning. But the fact remains that there is not a single state right now, not a single battleground state, and maybe they're just being cautious. There is not a single state that they are expressing confidence right now that they are going to win. They just keep reassuring their supporters that they still have a chance. And this is not the position that many of their supporters thought they'd be in at this point in the night.
All right, Nancy Cordes, thank you very much. And when
just on the screen behind me, they projected that the former president won North Carolina. That's going off an AP projection. CBS News has not called that yet. The big question is whether Trump will come out and speak. He's been watching the returns at his resort in Mar-a-Lago with family and friends like Elon Musk. So we're just waiting to see whether he does come out here and speak.
Pennsylvania, part of that blue wall, the Democrats say a must-win for the vice president. CBS News rates this race as toss-up. In Michigan, CBS News rates this race as a toss-up. The secretary and Wisconsin, CBS News rates this race as a toss-up at this hour. Scott, I'm sorry. Can I just, does it look like Republicans could control both chambers?
Oh, that's certainly in play.
And Gail, we've been here now for several hours, and we're getting a little bit of a sense of how the night is going.
Yeah, and it seems that if you're a Donald Trump supporter, you're feeling very confident and encouraged, and if you're a Kamala Harris supporter, you're feeling a little worried at this particular time. Although we keep saying there's still a lot of votes to be counted. People say they still are holding out hope, even though at this particular time she seems to be underperforming in all the things that they thought she would do well. You know, America is in labor today, and today we'll find out if we are delivering a boy or a girl. Right now, as you sit here tonight, it looks very good for the Donald Trump team. And I think people are trying to figure out what is happening to Kamala Harris's campaign at this particular point, even though people still have hope.
Well, I think the vote is still being counted in Pennsylvania.
We need to keep emphasizing that.
Yes, and we certainly don't know what's happening in Arizona or Nevada just yet, and
Or
Michigan,
Michigan.
Wisconsin. So the early states, Georgia and North Carolina, because they were the first to close, we were able to rate them as lean Republican. And so, you know, just as the hours go on and more votes come in, we'll have a better sense, I think, of what's happening there. But look,
you know what I think is troubling, though, Norah, is that she seems to be underperforming in areas that they thought she would do well. Certainly among women, certainly among the reproductive rights, certainly among some of the black voters. That's why I think people are so concerned at this particular point.
Speaker Mike Johnson just made remarks in Louisiana to his supporters. He believes he will enter next year as the Speaker of the House, should he win the gavel again, with more Republicans in the House. He also stated publicly that he believes there will be a Republican Senate and a Republican in the White House in Donald Trump. So
do you believe there is still a path to victory for Vice President Harris?
Well, there's still a path, but it's thorny, and we'll see how it comes out. The fact of the matter is that the blue wall is still there, though there seems to be some underperforming in some areas where we thought we were in good shape. But we'll just have to wait and see. It's not over yet.
As you noted, there is still a blue wall path to victory for the vice president. I know you know just about everybody in the Democratic Party. What is their concern tonight? Where is she underperforming?
There seems to be some underperforming taking place in Pennsylvania, really. I thought that there's some counties in Pennsylvania we seem not to be performing as well then. There's some that we look like we are winning, and still by a lesser margin than I expected. I'm really concerned about Michigan as well.
And we have a CBS News projection for the battleground state of North Carolina and its 16 electoral votes. We can project that Trump will win North Carolina at
Trump campaign headquarters. Norah?
Thank you. And it is a good night for Republicans. You just heard.
Have been the two issues. The Harris campaign had a much shorter runway, a much shorter time on this campaign, as you pointed out at the get-go, less than 100 days. And we're not seeing that reproductive health care vote play out as some had expected.
You know, I asked the Vice President Kamala Harris when I interviewed her in Kalamazoo, Michigan, just over a week ago, and I said, have you had enough time?
Yeah.
And she said, I'm going to make the most of the time I have. But there certainly will be some soul searching within the Democratic Party, whether President Biden stuck around too long. He didn't give the vice president enough time to present her case to the American people.
Norah, I'm listening to you, John, and I'm thinking about some of the things that we have heard over the course of this campaign, and you'll have to forgive me on some of these, but, you know, from the former president, the vulgarity that we've heard, talking about Arnold Palmer. We all remember that comments and the locker room and doing all the Joe Rogan podcasts and the Hulk Hogan ripping his shirt off at MSG and all of this. I think
the gesticulating with the microphone.
The gesticulation at the microphone. That so much of America went, I'm sorry, what is happening? How is that possibly going to appeal to people? And what we're seeing tonight is that it actually is not a turnoff to many people, to many of the male supporters, particularly who sat in MSG and cheered it on. And that was particularly a very bro-y feel, a very dark rally that we all talked about in the wake of it. And the question was, is this going to help Trump expand his base? And what you just said right now, it actually very well may be.
He won Bros in North Carolina by 21 points.
I just want to point out, we may be able to show this. In the popular vote right now, Trump has over 59 million and Harris has over 55 million. So he is currently winning the popular vote. When we come back.
Nancy, how is the Harris campaign reacting to the numbers they're seeing across the country?
Well, Lindsay, the Harris campaign is well aware of how worried Democrats across the country are right now. And so the Harris campaign chair, Jen O'Malley Dillon, has put out a memo trying to reassure nervous Democrats. She said that this is a razor-thin race, but that they still believe that the blue wall, this trio of states, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, are all within reach. And she says she's feeling good about what she's seeing. She does caution that there are a lot of outstanding votes in Wisconsin that won't come in until 3 to 5 in the morning. Obviously, we know we won't get some of Pennsylvania's votes in until tomorrow. But this is basically the best you can do to reassure people right now. A short time ago, Jim Clyburn, one of the leading Democrats in the House, a true veteran, expressed his own concerns. He said there is still a path, but it is narrowing. And here at Kamala Harris campaign headquarters at her alma mater of Howard University, the crowd has been extremely muted. They are watching the results come in. They are talking to each other. There's no jubilation whatsoever. They want to learn more.
Nancy, is the campaign giving any further details about when they can stop stressing, essentially when they think this will be a done deal and called?
No, they've said all along that it could be a day, it could be several days. They have always insisted that it was highly unlikely that we would know the outcome on election night. So that's something that they have been preparing their supporters for some time. What they hadn't prepared their supporters for was the possibility that they might be lagging in so many of these battleground states. They had been arguing that they had a chance of sweeping them just 12 to 24 hours ago.
Nancy, and the Senate is lean Republican at this hour. And let's take a look at the blue wall states. Harris campaign manager saying she still believes there is a path to victory with the blue wall states. CBS News rates the states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin as toss-up. What accounts for where we are at this point of the night? We should note that all the votes are not in. Things can change. The only state we projected is North Carolina. But where are we?
Well, just as a matter, whatever happens tonight, in terms of a political comeback story, leaving aside that he's totally redesigned a party around his views on the economy, immigration, it's already the fact that he's doing so well and it's so close is quite an extraordinary comeback for him.
Well, in addition to not only what happened on January 6th, even following those 2 impeachment trials, but of course, then 2 assassination attempts, a convicted felon, multiple federal felony counts against him.
Senior members of his national security team all saying he should not be allowed near power again. I mean, these are not rinky-dink people. These are former secretaries of state, national security advisors. He's not just changing the party. He may very well be changing American politics.
Norah, I wanted to pick up what John is saying, and you too, Cecilia, when you said, you used to think it was about your morals, your integrity, and your character. When we started out the evening, we said that the Harris campaign said that they were nauseously optimistic. Last time I checked, nausea is never a good thing. The Trump campaign was cautiously optimistic. And when I was in Pennsylvania talking to people, I had person after person, Trump supporter, say to me, yeah, he's mouthy, but I'm mouthy. Yeah, he doesn't tell the truth, but every politician lies. Yeah, he doesn't represent the values that I hold dear, but that's not what I'm looking for. I want to know, can this person do the job? When I asked, who would you trust to babysit your children? Nobody. Only one person chose Donald Trump. And I just think when you put it in that context, I'd like to know what that says about us as a country. What does this mean? John, is it a brand new party? Is it a brand new day? And we should also say nobody has 270 yet either. So the Harris campaign is still nauseously optimistic, but I bet they're getting a little sicker now as the night progresses.
There is this realignment, and we are going to be digesting this as a planet when we wake up tomorrow morning to figure out what's next. A third of the world has had a female leader. This country has not. And tonight, this was also a test of whether a woman could be a commander-in-chief of this country elected in a very short runway of an election against a man who has presented himself, despite what his national security advisors say, as about strength, as about he puts fear in other people.
I know, but you look at the exit polls. Harris overwhelmingly wins when people say they want their president to have good judgment. Trump overwhelmingly wins support when you say you're looking for someone who could lead and who can bring much-needed change.
Can't hear you talking.
People close to Trump tell me just in the last few minutes that it is notable that he has not yet made a statement. He is holding back from making remarks tonight because there is a growing sense inside of Trump's inner circle at the highest ranks of the campaign that tonight is shaping up well for Trump because there is a belief that he could win it within the next 6 to 12 hours outright. They're not betting that yet, but they're holding him back, and he's telling people behind the scenes he feels very good that Republicans are turning out.
Do you think he'll still say, Bob, the election was rigged?
If he wins?
Yeah.
I doubt it.
Yeah, I doubt it, too. I doubt it, too.
It is still early in the night with a number of votes to be counted. Let's go now.
What Kamala Harris needs, the vice president needs to prevail in Wisconsin and capture its 10 electoral votes. You see that, 56%. What does our estimate reveal? 45%. That is a substantial gap. What does Kamala Harris need? And we're talking about this in the sense that this is what her campaign manager, Jen O'Malley Dillon, has said is the place that this is a still winnable race. 52% in Michigan, outstanding vote. What is our CBS News estimate of the outstanding vote that she was likely to capture? 48%. That's a 4% gap. It is not catastrophic, but it is not a positive directional indicator. What does the vice president need, and what do we project? 57% is the need, 53% is the CBS News current estimate, with 85% of the vote in. These are trend lines beneath the toss-up designation, and these are not trend lines that augur well for the Harris campaign. And to Bob's point, that is why at Mar-a-Lago, the Trump inner circle believes what they have always said has come to fruition, that Trump is a turnout machine. If he was polling equally in this race, as he was in all the battleground states, he was going to overperform, even if it's just a tick or two, and that would make him highly competitive in every single battleground state. That is the trend beneath the toss-up designation we're seeing playing out right now.
That is quite illustrative. Major Garrett, thank you. And Kate.
Well, I think the night is shaping up as you've described it. I think the Trump campaign is done fairly well. I think they've performed better in certain areas, as you pointed out. But the night's not over.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone should be celebrating yet in Trump headquarters, but I think they got to be very, very pleased with where they are now and where they stand.
Well, even though we are rating this race a lean Republican, I can tell you here people are already celebrating as if they have won the state. And that he believes that former President Donald Trump has an insurmountable lead in this state. And so that's why many people here are very confident in the outcome.
CBS News now rates the Wisconsin presidential race as lean Republican. In the blue wall states, CBS News rates the states of Michigan and Pennsylvania as toss-up, and then Wisconsin as lean Republican.
Norah, CBS News has learned that Vice President Kamala Harris is now very unlikely to travel here to Howard University from her home about 2.5 miles away to deliver any kind of address to the supporters gathered here. Things are still just too uncertain. We are being told that it is unlikely she will come here to say anything. The question becomes, if she doesn't come here to speak to the thousands of people who are still gathered here, yes, the crowd has thinned out somewhat, but there's still a lot of people here who think they're going to be hearing from her. The question becomes, does she have someone else come in her stead to basically address the crowd and explain to them that the vice president is not going to be here to speak herself? The Harris campaign has made it pretty clear that they're putting all their eggs in the blue wall basket, and they're holding out hope for some kind of turnaround in those states. They're hoping that they get a big rush of votes from urban areas, but they also acknowledge that a lot of those votes are unlikely to come tonight. They're expecting votes from Milwaukee somewhere between 3 and 5 in the morning. They know that Pennsylvania takes days to count, so it appears that they have made a determination that there's nothing that Harris could say tonight that would make sense, and so she's going to hold off.
Will we hear from Donald Trump?
Donald Trump, the former president, is likely to speak tonight at some level. Whether he declares victory or not, we don't have any reporting on what exactly he's going to say. But it is likely that he heads to a victory party or to some kind of celebration of his reporters to give an update on the count, at the very least, to give an update on his perspective. Many Republicans across the country are telling CBS News at this hour that they remain increasingly confident that Republicans will win the White House, the House, and the Senate, but the count remains to be counted in so many of these states. So many top Democrats, I'm talking about people I really trust as sources on the Democratic side, are growing alarmed, frankly, as they look at these numbers.
And what is in particular in the numbers that's alarming?
They're not seeing the kind of support they need to from working people in the Midwest.
And we're going to go to that crucial definition of where things stand. 58% of the outstanding vote. What do we believe our projections of that underlying vote is achievable? 47%. That is becoming a gap that presents us with the designation moving from toss-up to lean Trump.
So if she loses Wisconsin,
10 electoral votes.
Right. She might need the 11 electoral votes that is in Arizona.
Oh, she would desperately need the 11 electoral votes.
Right, that's the only path to victory.
That's it.
So where does the vote look like now in Arizona?
The needs for Harris, 50. Our projections, 51%. That same designation we had a little bit ago because they just haven't counted that much vote in Arizona.
CBS News projection for the battleground state of Georgia and its 16 electoral votes. We can project that that Donald Trump is the projected winner in the state of Georgia at this hour. Our first projected winner of the night, Georgia, for Donald Trump.
The first flip.
The first flip, as we know that Joe Biden won Georgia 4 years ago. That's significant.
Yeah, but she has to do well enough in that group and then do well in her groups, and she's just not doing well enough with white non-college, whether it's in Georgia or in the Midwest.
That's what they think of, is what am I paying at the grocery store? They're not necessarily thinking of the data points that we are delivering on the national news that say, hey, the jobless rate is pretty good. Inflation is coming down.
Eggs and milk.
It's the lived experience of what you encounter. And that's something we saw in Georgia.
And I have to say, too, I think probably the media overemphasized the price of groceries, which are a main thing, but also...
You know they're in trouble when they start blaming each other, and it's coming in already. One congressman saying there'll be plenty of time to do this blame, but if there's one thing we're not doing right, the Democratic Party is a working-class voter problem.
He did very well, Donald Trump, with educated white men and white women, but it didn't seem to matter how...
Non-college educated.
Non-college educated, yes. But it didn't seem to matter how often you heard the economy's doing well, the job report is doing well. None of that seemed to matter. People would still say, I'm still paying too much for milk. I'm still paying too much for bread.
Well,
they can't feel it at home. It doesn't matter what you say.
You look at this. Since Biden took office, rents in the battleground states are up 20%. That's not because Joe Biden was elected. The cost of your rent is affected by a number of different factors, but people blame the boss. I mean, the grocery inflation, 22%.
But voters they don't give you credit for things that happen. They are concerned about the plenty of things that they legitimately feel about their own economic position.
Much to great frustration inside the Biden White House. Almost from day one, they would complain to you behind the scenes that they felt like they were never getting credit for the advancements in the economy that were happening even underneath him. They would scream from the rooftops, and he would do press conferences, or he would go to battleground states and talk about housing, and they felt like he never got the credit for it. There was nothing they could do to vocally challenge the microphone that Trump had on that point.
Let's listen now to the Harris campaign co-chair, Cedric Richmond. He's about to address the crowd at Howard University.
Good evening, HU. I want to say good evening to all of the Harris campaign, the campaign family. Thank you for all that you have done. So you won't hear from the vice president tonight. And go HU and go Harris. Thank you all.
And there you have the co-chair of the Harris campaign saying it's okay, everybody can go home. We're not going to have a decision tonight, and the vice president is not coming out to address, but we'll speak to the crowd tomorrow.
That is not going to land in a comforting way with Harris supporters, I think. And Nancy said it. We've all been talking about it, how extremely reminiscent this feels to 2016.
And also saying, too, Cecilia, we still have hope. There's still a path. It's a big sense of, a big case of deja vu.
He didn't say we still have a path.
No.
He said with their votes still being counted.
Yeah, he said the votes are still being.
Still have a path.
But he said the votes are still being counted, and that leads you to believe that there is that there still is hope. He didn't say, look, there's no chance. He said the votes are still being counted. So, there's a big case of deja vu, I think, for many people tonight.
What a shot this is, though, to see these supporters at her alma mater at Howard University, and many D.C. residents there in that neighborhood walking off of that campus right now, wondering when they will know the results of this election.
I know that as we watch the crowd disperse and wait for word from the Harris campaign about what is next, we enter this late morning period where votes are just still being counted. In Pennsylvania, it could take a couple of days. Welcome back to CBS News Election Night. You're seeing video of Trump supporters reacting to a projection that the former president will win the state of Georgia. As we see that Donald Trump has won Georgia and North Carolina, the path narrows for the vice president as you have rated Wisconsin as lean Republican.
Yep.
So many people are asking what's going on in the blue wall. What's happening?
Is that not only is turnout a little bit down, but Harris's margins are a little bit down from Joe Biden's in 2020.
Welcome back to CBS News Election Night headquarters in New York. It is now 1 a.m. in the East, 10 p.m. in the West, and polls are now closed across all 50 states. Former President Donald Trump and Republicans are having a very good night. And CBS News rates all 4 of those battleground states as toss-up at this hour. And as we mentioned, Donald Trump, the Republicans having a very good night.
Yes.
The pathway for Kamala Harris has narrowed. Her own campaign manager says it's the blue wall. So wanted to go back and see what's happening in Pennsylvania.
The simple truth, Norah, is the path for Vice President Harris is narrowing by the hour.
So she is underperforming Joe Biden and how he performed in 2020. Now, you have not characterized this race yet. Can you show us why?
Well,
why you haven't called it lean Republican, for instance?
Yeah,
Tell us why. Because we've still got 7% of the vote coming in, and it's coming in from cities.
Well, there still is outstanding vote. So let me show you where that is. And here is.
How does this square with the case that the Harris campaign was making? I mean, they claimed that they had the ground game, that it was far more superior, that they had knocked on millions of doors in these final days in these battleground states. Tell us what you were hearing from the campaign.
And that just hasn't panned out tonight, despite all of the money and the resources and the time that not only campaign staffers, volunteers, but the vice president herself poured into this state. And
for votes to come, she's going to need 68% of the outstanding vote.
She's going to need 68% of the outstanding vote, according to our estimates. And we place her estimate at 58% of that 68. So there's a 10 percentage point gap. That is problematic for the Harris campaign, and that, Norah, is putting it mildly. Look at our model. Here's that range, but it is getting narrower by the hour. The range for Trump is moving up, and that is positive direction for the former president.
Well, this is when we should.
If Wisconsin isn't available, as we say, it leans red tonight, she would have to go to Arizona to get to 270, and that would do it. Right, no, that would be 260. What am we doing here? 260, 272. Which one? I gave it to red. That's what I did. Okay, thank you. That would be blue. So there we go. Math isn't my thing, but the map tells the story, doesn't it? So yeah, the paths are narrowing for Harris. They're getting wider for Donald Trump. Here we are at 1 o'clock in the morning.
And that means we can now project that Republicans will take control of the Senate.
So at this point, Norah, you get a sense Republicans have secured a majority. Now it's a matter of margins. Democrats are vulnerable to losing 2-3 more seats as this night goes on. And for the Senate, every single piece of that puzzle, every single seat along that margin is impactful. Wow.
Fascinating to see those numbers and the Republican performance amongst those Senate candidates there.
And then in 2024, he has done better with women voters than he did in 2020. So he has improved with women voters. He did very little. In fact, some would argue he leaned into his problems with women voters, and it didn't hurt him in the least in the electorate.
What does that say to you, John? What does this mean?
There's no question that Donald Trump is Donald Trump in full. He ended his campaign purely, fully Donald Trump, and that is what Americans, it appears, are signing up for.
It's just interesting again and again to come back to the two things that Trump voters told us. It's the economy and it's the border.
And incredible reporting for 60 Minutes about the promises that Donald Trump has made, not only to secure the border, but also a mass deportation. Thank you. It is past 1:30 in the morning, almost 1:30 in the morning. We're looking at live pictures of Trump campaign headquarters in West Palm Beach, where the crowd is cheering as another network just called a battleground state for Donald Trump. And the crowd excited as it looks like their candidate is marching closer to returning to the White House.
And Lindsay, I can also tell you that the Trump campaign feels very good. And they mentioned the gender gap in the regard that there was so much made about this so-called silent Harris supporter who might, vote for Harris and not talk about it. And they're saying that, that just didn't pan out. Lindsay.
It is now 1:30 in the morning, and just in from the data desk, CBS News rates Pennsylvania as lean Trump. Keystone State there, leaning Trump, as we have just about 94% of the vote in. Doing well, Donald Trump doing very well in rural areas. And let's take a look now at the blue wall. This was the easiest path to victory for the vice president, Kamala Harris. Michigan still a toss-up at this hour, but her path to victory has narrowed significantly.
While we were in commercial break, we're saying lean Republican for Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, Fox News, which is playing on the monitors here behind me, they have called that race for Donald Trump. And when that moment happened, it got loud in here. There was a roar. There was reverberations. The phones came out. What went wrong for Democrats tonight? Why were they unable to capitalize on what seemed like some momentum in the final week? I'm just saying simply, Democratic heads are exploding all over America. How do you explain what happened to them? A couple of the quotes I got from people is, look, Democrats have lost touch with everyday Americans. Beyonce doesn't pay my bills. Democrats turn their back on us, and if you turn your back on us, eventually we're going to turn our back on you. It's a wake-up call here. That's the feeling in the room for Democrats.
Yeah, there we see Elon Musk jumping on the stage. I mean, Elon Musk just today said to his 203 million followers on Twitter, go to the polls and vote for Donald Trump today. Did that clearly make a difference for him? This whole bro code thing that we keep hearing about.
There's an erosion of institutional trust in so many places in this country that have.
So, John, what happens to this concept called checks and balances? Because if he gets in, he has the House, possibly the Senate, the Supreme Court. What happens? It seems that he would be in power with no guardrails, so to speak.
Ground game and knocking on doors and making phone calls may not matter anymore.
There are some who still see a narrow path for the vice president, and I think it's important to say that there is a narrow path, but it is narrowing by the hour, as Major said earlier, reassessing some of the things that we think are important. Ed talked about how you organize a campaign. Clearly, some of the tried and true campaign methods that Democrats leaned on, the organization, the 3 whatever million door knocks over the last weekend, it can only get you so far. And I can tell you there are a lot of vulnerable communities, particularly in the Democratic coalition, that feel very, very insecure at the moment. And want to also say that as well.
There. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hi,
Good
Norah.
morning, I should say. Good
Hello.
morning.
Well, good morning. That's right. We lose track of time. All right. The data have told us over and over a discouraging story for the vice president and a delightful story, if you will, for former President Trump. Nevada, we go through this process. What does Kamala Harris need in Nevada? 55%. What do we project she will collect? Based on the outstanding vote, 45%. That gap is deeply discouraging news for the vice president.
Well, we know that the path for Vice President Harris has narrowed considerably, maybe beyond her reach tonight. There are other news organizations that are now awarding this to the former president, and he is set to take the stage here in the coming minutes and will address the world and likely declare victory, because it appears to be heading in that direction. What's also happening, though, Republican Senate candidates winning across the Midwest as well. A very good night for Republicans.
This is an extremely jubilant crowd. Just on the monitor, I don't know if you can see behind me, they are playing Fox News, and Fox News has called Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and thus they have called the presidency. And so I'm saying that because when that was coming up on the screen, this crowd went absolutely wild. And so that's also kind of notable here that so many races have been called when we were expecting a longer, stretched out election week.
Kayla. It is 2 a.m. in the East, 11 p.m. in the West. Former President Donald Trump is having a very big night. And we're in the Senate. CBS News projects Republicans will take control there, flipping from the Democrats. In the biggest battleground state of all, Pennsylvania, CBS News rates that as lean Republican. It has been a toss-up through much of the night. Other networks have called it for the former president. Pennsylvania, one of what they call the blue wall states. Alongside Pennsylvania, CBS News rates Wisconsin as lean Republican as well. Michigan, at this hour, a toss-up.
So I just want to say, when Jim Clyburn was here earlier this evening, he said that there was still a path, but the path was thorny. I think now we can even see that looks like the thorns are bending to the side as we sit here. When you were here earlier today or yesterday, and now my days are all running together, you said the conversation about black men was being exaggerated, that you didn't think that was the case. Are you still, as you sit here today, an hour ago you had hope? Do you still have hope yourself as you sit here now?
Well, Gail, I got to have hope, but also I got to read polls and data, and the data certainly suggests that things aren't going well.
Joel, is it, you know, and I even hate to ask this question, I'm asking as I'm clutching my pearls, could it be a woman issue? When Barack Obama suggested it, people thought, some people were offended that he even raised that issue. But do we have to realistically think about that? We've had Hillary Clinton now, and now maybe even Kamala Harris. Do you feel that this country isn't ready for a woman president?
I'm just wondering, as you sit here, I'm thinking through what a Trump presidency would mean for the legacy of Joe Biden.
Obviously, there are a lot of people that want to start pointing fingers, and I think that's already happening. I think Kamala Harris actually, for what she was handed sometime in the middle of July, ran a fairly competent, good, durable campaign. Clearly, based on what we're seeing tonight, probably is not going to be enough, but folks are going to fight about the different types of messaging that they could have gone to.
Joel,
but yeah.
I apologize. Stand by. CBS News has a new projection for the battleground state of Pennsylvania and its 19 electoral votes. CBS News projects that Donald Trump will be the winner of the state of Pennsylvania. That is a state that Biden carried 4 years ago, but Trump won in 2016, a major projection, and that essentially closes the pathway for Kamala Harris and the presidency. Robert Costa.
So much disappointment among my top Democratic sources tonight, just in the last few minutes, about Pennsylvania. There was a massive disappointment for Democrats tonight. Pennsylvania, yes, part of the blue wall, but it's central to Democratic power in this country.
And of course, it's where Joe Biden is from, Scranton, Pennsylvania. Yes, I mean, Joe from Scranton. I mean,
I thought I heard.
I know.
I heard crowd cheering. Excuse me.
That was the people on Times Square.
That it does hear like there is some commotion.
He is a seismic force in American history. Whether you dislike him, hate him, loathe him, love him, are indifferent. This is a figure now who has been a nominee 3 times and potentially winning the presidency twice after all of the convictions.
Yes.
All of the challenges.
Impeachments.
He might be back.
You know, it's interesting. When attack, deny, never admit defeat, and never apologize. And people seem to think that that is what he continues to do in all areas of his life when he is faced with a problem. And that seems to have served him well as we sit here tonight. You know, it's interesting, when we started the night, guys, we kept saying it's going to be a long night. We're not going to know anything today. Certainly not Pennsylvania. Now we're sitting here a little after 2 o'clock, and it looks like that this race is over.
And that we were bracing collectively, I think, as a country for Donald Trump to preemptively declare victory. And I don't know that this is so preemptive at this point.
And while he doesn't have everything he needs to win, should he win, he'd be the oldest man ever elected and the second man to be elected at different times.
And what happens to Republicans who may not be okay with the way Donald Trump behaves or some of his beliefs? Are they just totally out now?
Don Deal, D-O-N-D-E-A-L. Donald Trump defies the odds again. That is the story of this campaign for the people in the room here.
Cecilia Vega, I know you wanted to add something about the question about the Latino vote, because Trump is building a new coalition, and part of that does include Latinos.
It very much does. And I wanted to address what Leslie Sanchez said, that when she says people are going to be very excited about that. And I think there are a lot of people in this country who are very excited right now, many of them in that room. I also think a lot of people are very scared tonight. When you deporting entire families together, including children who were born in this country. So there are a lot of people who are scared right now.
And now, Donald Trump, along with his wife, his vice presidential pick, his son Barron Trump, who we rarely see,
and cast his first vote today for his dad.
God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Well, there you see former President Donald Trump with his family and friends on stage addressing supporters in West Palm Beach, talking about unifying the country.
Well, J.D. Vance said it's the greatest political comeback in the history of the United States. Completely. Totally. And not just a comeback by a squeaker. A comeback where he has helped his party and lots of candidates win tonight, and where all of his impulses. The great question with Donald Trump is, will the office, will his aides, will traditions, will the courts check his impulses? His impulses have not been checked, and the victory is a ratification of his impulses. And so this is a new... I
know, John, but why should people start checking his impulses? It seems to have worked for him. I just don't see how he changes now.
Oh no, there's no right.
Yeah.
I'm just saying this is the beginning of a different kind of, as Bob was saying earlier, an entirely different kind of presidency than we have
like we've
thought
never
before.
seen.
Yeah.
Yes.
And because, Scott, what does this mean for the many criminal cases that Donald Trump is facing?
He remains charged with federal felonies for the conspiracy alleged to overturn the 2020 election results. He has
more clear visually, 71% of the outstanding vote. We project she will get 54% of it.
And as we see, it has been a successful night for Donald Trump and the Republican Party, winning decisively in a number of these battleground states and the Senate, right, Ed?
Yes, again. And we should also point out, we have not heard anything from any Democrat working on the Harris campaign or at the White House or anywhere else disputing what we're seeing tonight. Nobody has stopped this momentum that is clearly going. There's no question that this is happening. Democrats up and down the ballot understand that what is unfolding is legit. We have not heard from the Harris campaign whether she has made any call to the former president, the president-elect, presumed possibly soon, whether she plans to. We should also note there is nothing on the public schedule at the White House tomorrow for the president, but a national security briefing in the afternoon that now could include all sorts of urgent matters from around the world as allies check in tomorrow. But again, no one in the Democratic Party disputing what's going on tonight.
And it is 3 a.m. in the East, and a very big night for Donald Trump and the Republican Party.
You know, I'm still struck by her underperformance with women.
You heard him say in his speech, promises made, promises kept. And Maya Angelou used to say, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Do we have any reason to doubt that he won't do everything that he said he's going to do?
And more.
But Kamala Harris always talked about the working class and the middle class and what she wanted to do.
But it was
for
a compressed campaign.
Okay.
Just a few weeks.
Did they not believe her?
It's not that they didn't believe her. So many voters I met feel like they didn't fully know her in terms of speaking to their grievances. They respected her as a vice president of the United States, but she was a relatively low vice president. Low profile, with working with President Biden, and running from August to now is not easy, even if you're a perfect politician with a perfect campaign.
Morning, it is 3:30 a.m. in the East, 12:30 in the West. We have been on the air for 9 hours straight covering this election, and it has been a very big night for Donald Trump and the Republican Party as the former president appears to be headed for re-election. He declared victory in the past hour in a speech to supporters in Florida.
Kamala Harris got 10 points more than Donald Trump, but Joe Biden got 15 points more. This is a post-Roe going away, post the conviction of Donald Trump.
It's almost inexplicable.
Well, it's going to require a lot of, there'd be a really interesting conversation because that
45%.
That exactly 45% for Donald Trump. He got 32% in 2020.
And I remember before that, George W. Bush had the high water mark at 40%.
Right. Yeah. And
they've also said that what they don't like are the quote unquote woke policies of the Democratic Party.
Yep.
How much does that play into it?
It's good. If you look at all this, the fact that they couldn't win women, the fact that they couldn't hold on to their Latino coalition, there's going to be a big reckoning about whether or not there was too much discussion about that over the last several years. Yes.
I know. So, Ed, what is a lesson, do you think, for the Democratic Party from what happened in 2016 to what is happening today in 2024?
I mean,
what are the lessons here?
Well, they were identity politics.
Right.
Yeah.
But I will say
too extreme is fine. Can I just say one other thing, one other dog that didn't bark? Republicans for Harris. Kamala Harris spent a lot of time, campaigned a lot with Liz Cheney. Only 5% of Republicans in the exit polls voted for Harris. It was 6% for Biden in 2020.
So Bob, where was that secret women Republican vote we kept hearing about? That they're going to say one thing to their friends and their spouses, but they're going to get in the booth and they're going to make another decision. What happened to them?
I never saw it.
Yeah.
I never saw it.
You never thought that was the thing.
Well, it didn't. That's why.
You never thought it was a thing.
That's why Harris
I
is
didn't
so
think it
small.
was a thing. I never saw it.
That's why Harris only won women by 10 points.
Yeah.
When I was on the campaign trail in 2024 and in 2022, when I was talking to Republican voters, centrist voters, Democratic voters, even though Democrats took a bit of a different view, many voters did not process January 6, 2021 as a grave moment in American democracy. And because of that, a lot of Republican voters are not turning on the character and conduct question.
Yeah. How is that possible, though, Bob, when you look at those pictures? I think that's what many people are grappling with. You look at January 6th, he characterized it as a protest of love. He characterized it as patriots. Yet you're right when you say that is not how people saw that. How is that possible?
One of the things that we have heard about the people surrounding Donald Trump is the idea of retribution. And he has talked about retribution. There has even been a so-called secretary of retribution, where all of those who have wronged Donald Trump will face retribution, punishment, whatever it may be, from the former president, future president, and the White House. How will the Justice Department in some ways be changed and perhaps weaponized against those enemies?
I mean, he has threatening revoking broadcast licenses for broadcast networks, including the threat to revoke this one, going after what he calls the enemy within of his political rivals by name, Biden, Pelosi, the entire, quote, Biden crime family. He says he would fire special counsel Jack Smith within 2 seconds of taking office. And as we were saying earlier, he called for the televised military tribunal of Liz Cheney. We started this conversation, John, when you questioned whether the checks in place would keep him in check. I wonder if there's anyone left around him right now who would even impose some of those checks. The John Kellys and the Mark Milleys are gone. Those are the people who were the checks before.
Is the Liz Cheney wing of the party big? Is it even big enough to fit on an airport shuttle bus, or does it even exist anymore? I mean, do we need a new language to talk about that portion of the Republican Party?
Well, those shuttle buses have at least 14 seats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
So, an airport shuttle bus. Are there enough? Are there 14 seats, Bob?
The way we think about the shape of the Republican Party and how small that is and kind of what role it plays.
It's not even about whether we should rethink. We are being forced to rethink.
Yeah. So what?
Our CBS News data desk has a race update now. Nevada is lean Republican. That is.
Yes, Norah. So let's walk through Nevada and why we have created this lean Trump designation for Nevada. Let's go to the model. Show you what the model is right now. It shows, as you can see at home, a very, very narrow band, almost an impossible band. But we still don't have quite enough vote in to make an absolute declaration. But the needs of Kamala Harris in Nevada are pronounced. 66% of the outstanding vote is what we estimate that she needs. And, well, you can see the sizable gap here. This is a lean Nevada, but it is moving very, very much in the for Trump and confirmed category. We're just waiting for a little bit of more vote to come in on that for absolute clarity.
So, Major, what battleground state looks good for Kamala Harris tonight? I know. You keep thinking through them.
No, there is no really good answer for that right now. I mean, even Michigan, which theoretically looks okay, 66%, 53%, okay. That's sort of in the ballpark, but nothing really looks that great in terms of the remaining toss-up or lean states. Let's go to Wisconsin. Needs 78%, 62% is our estimate. I mean, it just doesn't look that great. Pennsylvania's already gone. Arizona, I've already worked through Arizona, Nevada. I just went through Wisconsin, Michigan. They're in a theoretical range, but only theoretical. There is no uncalled state that form the backbone of the uncalled battlegrounds that look positive or even slightly positive for the vice president at this hour. The only one that is in that category would be Arizona.
Truly remarkable, what looks like a sweeping victory for Donald Trump. And certainly he will claim the mandate from the results tonight. Let's bring in some news shortly about whether Donald Trump has officially reached the threshold to be named the next president-elect of the United States. We have not heard from Vice President Kamala Harris. Her campaign co-chair spoke to supporters saying go home for the night. And CBS News now projects that Donald Trump is the winner in Wisconsin. That gives him the number of electoral votes he needs to become the 47th president of the United States. This is an incredible moment in American history for Donald Trump, who faced a number of challenges in this contest. It was an election unlike any of us have ever covered.
A life unlike any we've ever covered. This will usher in potentially an unprecedented era in American history to have someone who believes firmly that he has total presidential power in terms of official acts based on the Supreme Court ruling earlier this year, does not have to serve in prison despite being convicted in a criminal trial, and despite pressuring his own vice president to overturn an election, has been warmly embraced by the party, the Republican Party once again, and won the presidency based on our CBS News projection. And he is willing and able and ready and excited, I'm told by sources close to him, and including by him himself, to return to the White House and wield power. Some Americans are very scared, alarmed. They see Donald Trump as a threat, a danger to American democracy. But as you saw in Florida tonight, many Americans believe he's an agent of change. He's an outsider who speaks to their grievances. This country's not really necessarily ideologically divided, or red versus blue, but it's divided deeply about who Donald Trump is, what he represents, and what this country is in November of 2024.
A sweep by Donald Trump, who is also doing well in the popular vote. Behind Trump could win all of the 7 battleground states tonight?
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. Could. Maybe not this morning, but yes, he is on pace to win Nevada. He is on pace to win Michigan. Arizona is the only one that still looks theoretically possible for the vice president.
I want to be clear about the timing. He could win them, not necessarily tonight. I'm not sure all those ballots will get counted this evening or this morning, as the case may be.
It's the morning. It's the morning.
It's all a blur now. But at some point, we'll get through Nevada, Arizona, and Michigan.
And
it also gave him the opportunity, Donald Trump, to say, which I think resonated with many of his supporters, that God had chosen him to survive that assassination attempt. And while some people recoiled at him saying that, it was another emotional connection for Donald Trump with his supporters.
And I think we have to all take time to digest this. We're doing it in the moment, but I don't think we are all quite grasping the gravity of sending Donald Trump back to Washington with the word you used, Norah, a mandate. It's not just the man. It is a mandate. They have control in a significant way of Senate and possibly the House. We may not know that definitively for a little bit of time, but this is a really interesting message being sent by the electorate tonight.